What's up, everybody? We're live on StreamYard. We are live on Ticket TV. We will be in a little bit live on Sports Talk 1050 WTK as well, as we are here for post-game coverage following Michigan's victory over Rutgers 52-17 in North Jersey this evening. And usually I do my post-game show. Sam does his post-game videos on the MichiganInsider.com. And well, we're both up here at Traverse City and said, you know what? Let's just do this together so we can all hang out. And well, since Steve Clark's getting another hour of sleep when the clocks get set back, I said, Steve, you're going to join us too. And he said, sure. So here we are. The pregame show crew is all together. Plus, we have Alejandro Zuniga from the MichiganInsider.com joining us from North Jersey as well. Guys, good morning. It's now 12:08. So good morning. How's everybody doing?
I'm doing great. How are things in Piscataway, Mr. Zuniga?
Oh man, they were just chopping all night. They just kept chopping. They kept chopping. And then the second half happened, and they stopped chopping. So
yeah, it looks like it was. I mean, the tunnel was like a treacherous thing, was it not?
whew, man, I'm still shaking in my boots, Sam. That was tough. It was the Rutgers team. It was the Michigan team. It was the media members. It was the refs. It could have gotten really hairy really fast, but somehow here in the birthplace of college football, they have figured out how to make it work with just one tunnel. Not sure how they did it. Michigan clearly doesn't know. It must be something very special about the water here in Piscataway.
North Jersey water. We don't touch it.
Yeah. Guys, the game wound up looking like we expected it to look in the second half, a whitewash of a third quarter. Excellent adjustments, defense, clutch. But I said after the game that this was, even though the stats are not pretty, even though they didn't hit in the passing game like you want them to hit, I thought it was a step forward for a passing game that clearly needs some work. So before this game, there are a couple of things that really were noteworthy, carryover from last year. The Rutgers defensive line played Michigan's run game well last year. Their front, I remember the way that they moved. They would slant their front. They would shoot gaps. Their movement, their quickness, and their physicality gave Michigan problems, especially with their inability to play complementary football. They didn't have a passing game to really make Rutgers back out of all that aggression up front. And so when Rutgers knew the run was coming, they could stop it. And we saw that tonight. When Rutgers knew Michigan was going to run, I mean, both times in goal line situations took Michigan 4 downs to get it in. When Rutgers knew it was coming, they were able to slow it down. What I was looking for in this game was Michigan to be able, with their passing game, be very intentional about involving the right wide receivers and taking shots down the field. They did both early in the game. Not successfully, Steve Clark. They were not able to hit on those plays, but to start repping them, I think, was very important. Very important for J.J. McCarthy, very important for those receivers, very important for their development of that part of their game as they move forward. They were better in the second. I thought they were hamstrung a little bit by third down play calling. There were a couple of times 3rd and 4 or less, not in red zone situations, but there were runs 2 or 3 times, and they got stuffed both times. So I thought they needed to diversify third down play calling. They did that in the second half.
We are going to be getting ready to go live on the radio momentarily. Make sure to check both of your actual computer speakers themselves. We're going to make sure all of our technical stuff is locked and loaded.
Yes, sir.
And Derek's going to count me in when we are ready on radio.
All right, we are live on radio in 5, 4, 3, 2.
This is the Retirement Income Solutions Locker Room Wrap-Up Show on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket. We are online at WTK.com to find out how Retirement Income Solutions can help grow and preserve your wealth. Visit them at risadvisory.com. That's risadvisory.com. And I'm joined by my guys, Sam Webb and Steve Clark. We're also joined by Alejandro Zuniga from MichiganInsider.com following Michigan's 52-17 win over Rutgers this evening in Piscataway, New Jersey. Michigan now 9-0 on the season, 6-0 in Big Ten play. Rutgers falls to 4-5. We're done with them. and we don't worry about that. Of course, we've got a lot to get to on the show. We're going to get to the drive of the game brought to you by Brighton Ford, the offensive play of the game brought to you by Bud Light, the defensive play of the game brought to you by the Reed Law Group, and the gem of the game brought to you by Lewis Jewelers, plus the KeyBank key players of the game, and a whole lot more here on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV. And people might be asking, why is Sam here? Why is Steve here? Well, my guys are here because, well, Sam does a post-game wrap-up on the MichiganInsider.com, just like I do a post-game wrap-up on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket. And Steve Clark is up here with us in Grand Traverse Resort, and he could be sleeping, but he's going to get an extra hour of sleep anyway. We're going to be turning the clocks back when we all go to bed anyway. So he figured he's here. And like he said earlier, we had the bye week. We hung out and talked football that weekend anyway. Like, that's just what we do. So Steve's with us, Sam is here, and Alejandro is in New Jersey. So, guys, we get the victory, and this is, of course, really about the third quarter as Michigan blows the doors open in the third quarter, and they outscored their opponent 38-0 in the second half. And in the last 4 games in the second half, no points against from Indiana in the second half, 3 points by Penn State in the second half, a shutout against Michigan State in the second half, and now a shutout against Rutgers in the second half as well. And that's now 4 straight games, Sam. In the second half, the defense has been pretty darn spectacular.
Yeah, it came out and slammed the door on them right away. Michael Barrett with a career night. Great pass drop right into the part of the throwing lane, and Gavin Wimsatt didn't see him. He gets that pick, and then he gets a deflected pick and returns it for a touchdown. But to me, they're a challenged offense, Rutgers, anyway. What was Michigan going to be able to do offensively itself in this game against a team that they could not just line up and punch in the mouth and run it down their throats last year? They couldn't do that in this game either. And Jim Harbaugh said as much as halftime, I'm impressed with their physicality. You just can't line up and tee off on them. You're going to have to make some adjustments. And you saw them do that, use Donovan Edwards a little more in the passing game. But as I was saying at the onset before we went live here on the air, very intentional about getting the receivers involved, very intentional about taking some shots downfield, even though it wasn't successful, which a lot of people are rightfully calling out. They have work to do in that regard. But they had to start repping it, is the point that I'm trying to make. If you're going to get to the point where you're able to dial it up when you want in games, you gotta get the reps in games so guys are able to hone that and dial it in. And I want to go to Alejandro because I know you gotta check out of there over in Piscataway. But Jim Harbaugh talked about it at halftime, making some adjustments. They made some of those adjustments at halftime offensively. They've been doing it all season defensively. It added up to a blowout in the second half.
Yeah, it was very much the same sort of script that we saw at the Indiana game, the same sort of script that we saw with Penn State, that we saw with Michigan State. It was a couple big plays for Rutgers in this first half, and then defensively, Michigan slammed the door. But like you said, Sam, really the offensive side of the ball, I thought it was impressive to see what Donovan Edwards could do. I mean, we saw Donovan Edwards have a breakout game at about this time last year. That was at Maryland. He had 10 catches. He had 100-plus receiving yards. And, I had players telling me in the offseason, Donovan Edwards is our most dangerous player. And why is that? It's because he can carry the ball to the backfield. He can hit a home run when he's carrying the ball, and he can split out wide and catch passes. I thought it was encouraging, at the very least, to see J.J. McCarthy take some shots into the end zone for Donovan Edwards. They took some shots into the end zone for Luke Schoonmaker. They tried the deep ball to Amorian Walker, who we haven't seen on the offensive side for weeks at this point. They tried those deep shots. Are they hitting them? No. Jim Harbaugh said, hey, we're hitting them in practice. It's been an ongoing theme. You got to think they're going to hit them at some point, but you got to try them to hit them. And at least they tried them, and they hit a couple of them. Donovan Edwards, a couple big catches. Ronnie Bell got free a couple times. Andrell was open. He shot, it was on his fingertips. But they let JJ air it out a little bit, and props to him for coming back. Had a really solid second half after he got beat up a bit at the end of the first.
Steve Clark, if it wasn't a thing, they wouldn't have come out the way that they did, right? Clearly, they were thinking along the lines that a lot of us were, that, hey, it's not like you should be alarmed. And they clearly were 8-0 coming into this game. Why would you be alarmed? But if you're going to win a championship, you're going to be a championship team, there are aspects that they have to get better at. And the throw game, particularly the downfield throw game, they needed to get better at. And you got to start Hitting it in practice is one thing. There's a difference between State Street and Main Street. They say that all the time, right? And so that's why they gotta get that honed in games. You got to throw them in games to hone them. At least they started throwing them again today.
So Michigan all season long has been trying to, show their exertions. The testosterone is coming out of there because they're saying we're running the ball and we dare you to stop us. And after 8.5 games, nobody was stopping Michigan. And they never panic at halftime because they believe that this philosophy carries over into the second half, wears defenses down, and Michigan wins big. Except in this half, it looked like Rutgers was up for a 60-minute challenge playing that way. Michigan recognized it early, trying to get some deep shots to appease some things to make sure that you're getting your receivers hit for various reasons. But in the second half, they did have to change a bit, and they did change. And then they were sparked once again by a defense that, as Ira pointed out, continuously rings the bell coming out of that locker room into the second half, only giving up, 3 points in the last 4 games in the second half. So not at all a problem with Michigan's defense. But going into halftime, you saw that J.J. McCarthy was being hit.
He was.
Blake Corum was not 100%. There was something going on with him. And then Donovan Edwards comes in and does just fine. Shares the lead with Blake Corum with 109 yards rushing. But Edwards also leading the team in receiving with 52.
Yeah, it was – you mentioned Amarion Walker. They have been talking for weeks inside – how he was getting deep in practice, and they're hitting him in practice, and they're going to hit him in games. And we've been talking about it in a pregame show, Amarion Walker, and it hadn't manifested on the field. Today, again, you could tell that everything that we've been talking about, and maybe not to the degree that we're talking about it on the outside, but they are talking about it inside. Like, we need to get better at that. We need to work on it. Whether it's J.J. McCarthy getting reps just out of reach, I don't think that was necessarily an overthrow to Andrell. I don't know if he slowed up, but it was almost there. But you got to get that timing down, right? Amarion Walker, that's his first deep shot since the first game of the season or so. So you gotta get more reps in there. But there were a couple of times right down the middle of the field where J.J. hit his guy in stride, and he wasn't able to hold on, either a PBU and not having strong hands or just flat out drops. So you could just see just a little out of sync, Alejandro. But the other piece to really look at is he took a lot of hits in this game in the pocket. You got to look at the injuries, and I wonder, Alejandro, if Jim gave an update on the injury situation that he had right now. It felt like a lot of this was holding some guys out, but anything in the way of timeline for return to some of those guys?
Yeah. So some positive news pretty much all around. Jim Harbaugh said post-game that Roman Wilson, wide receiver, he's been out this week, obviously didn't travel. He's expected to be back next week, should be good to go. Harbaugh also gave positive indications for Ryan Hayes. Obviously, he was out this week as well. He should be. Harbaugh expects that he could go next week. And then I know we just mentioned Blake Corum as well. We spoke to Blake Corum post-game. I know he was puking, I believe is the scientific term, on the sideline there for I think the second time this season. He said he's fine. He said it's just the nerves that get to him. Maybe it's the Sour Patch Kids because he has that Costco size bag that he drags out before every game with him. But he said he was doing fine. It's just the nerves. He's going to go get it checked out with the doctor, but he said it's nothing to worry about. So good indications all the way around. Harbaugh. We also spoke to Jeff Percy, who made his first start on the offensive line. Jim Harbaugh said, first glance, thought he did okay. Thought he improved in the second half. And, as you guys saw as well as I did, in the second half, J.J. McCarthy stayed a bit cleaner, didn't take quite as many hits, did throw the ball away a couple times, as I thought was smart. But after the end of that first half where he looked sore out there already. Yeah. The offensive line did a better job protecting him, and the offense did better as a result.
Parting shots, Alejandro, because I know you got to get out of there. Any other real takeaways from the post game or from the game itself as Michigan heads into this contest against Nebraska next week?
I think the main takeaway, and it's been the takeaway for every game where Michigan's kind of played the same script, it's they go into halftime with confidence, and I think that happened again today. They were losing. I don't think anyone expected that. But the post-game, or the halftime message, as was reiterated to us in the post-game, was we will be fine if we play up to our level, and that's what happened. I think too, I asked Mike Morris was it just nice to play a football game after how emotionally taxing of a week this must have been? And he said, we wanted to play physical football, we wanted to play disciplined football, and we wanted to play Michigan football. And I don't think they did that in the first half. I think it was a pretty sloppy first half, all things considered. But I think it was sort of cathartic for the defense to score a pick six, to finally have those takeaways that they've been looking for all season. I think it was cathartic for the offense to punch it in. 6 times in 7 red zone opportunities, they scored touchdowns. So in the second half, I do feel like that was a bit of a palate cleanser after what's been a really rough, 8 days or so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great job in Piscataway, Alejandro. Get back home safe, and we'll see you when you get back to Ann Arbor.
Thank you very much, you guys. Keep shopping, all right?
Yeah, make sure Alejandro gets out because nobody wants to get stuck in Piscataway, New Jersey.
Right.
That's not a permanent place you want to go. Sam, I'm kind of curious because I'm watching the game, especially in the first half. I was thinking a lot about how, you played Penn State and Michigan State in back-to-back games, and you played Rutgers after that. It's hard to get up for that game as it is, but you throw in the assault and everything, and just the week. It's probably been a really long week. It felt at some point in time like another one of those just get to halftime kind of games, and then they'll readjust and be fine. And that's how it played itself out. Can it be kind of thrown to that as much as anything? A little sluggish on the road. You got some injuries. You're coming off. It's a letdown kind of game after 2 really important. You're playing 2 ranked, run ranked team in a rivalry game. The assault, the week aftermath after that, you can kind of have a letdown anyway.
Well, so I want to be careful to not take credit away from Rutgers too. I think you're right. I think they dealt with a lot emotionally this week. You had an offensive lineman getting his first start. That means you're down 2 starters along the offensive line, and you got some guys in there that are banged up. And then I know everyone has bumps and bruises at this point of the season, but you saw Trevor Keegan there in the game toward the end, kind of limping around a little bit. So you have a game front, a physical front that is juiced up and jazzed up by their home crowd, and a team that should have some confidence at least about their ability to be man enough against Michigan against the run. You're going to need some help in this game. You're going to need some bounces to go your way. You're going to need a block punt, right? You're going to need Michigan to make some mistakes. But those things were going their way, and it was kind of building their confidence up. And they were getting some hits on JJ. And so, the cumulative effect of those hits, you start to see JJ kind of fall off his throws a little bit, right? After you get hit a little bit, and this is even veteran quarterbacks that happens to. So you had some things that sort of added up to why Michigan was maybe struggling a bit more. But the biggest thing, Steve Clark, is they need – there's an in-between the alarmists that we see on social media who's like, oh, my God, the pass game is just terrible. I said they took some steps in the passing game, and you would have thought I said, man, this is basketball on grass, that they're amazing in the pass game, which I didn't say. I said they took a step forward with their passing game. But when I say that, you got folks on the other end who are like, oh, well, we won. We scored 52 points, and they beat Michigan State 29-7. Why are you talking about them throwing the football when they're blowing teams out? Because what is the measure? Yes, the most important thing is to win games. They're winning these games, but they aspire to be a championship team. And if you're going to be a championship team, you have got to be more complete than they've shown themselves to be. And we saw today against a Rutgers team that is not very good in the grand scheme of things, that you have some more work to do in your throw game, but they started to do it, Steve. That's the thing. That's my biggest takeaway.
So, first of all, if you read the Rutgers papers tomorrow, what they're going to say is Rutgers once again looks like a capable team, but they shot themselves in the foot like they do every other game. And, they're not going to talk about Michael Barrett's great plays or anything like that. They're going to talk about how a freshman quarterback threw, 2 untimely interceptions deep in their own territory that broke the game wide open, and it basically broke Rutgers back. That's a part of it. You're talking about a true freshman quarterback, shades of green I talked about in the pregame show. And Rutgers makes plays, but eventually they make enough mistakes where it comes back to haunt them. There was that. Michigan certainly earned some of those mistakes that Rutgers made. And then the second thing has been my bugaboo for the last 5-6 games now. red zone opportunities and what are they doing with them. Now, prior to Cornelius Johnson's touchdown grab, the last time that a Michigan quarterback threw to a receiver, Michigan receiver, in the end zone in a red zone play was back when Cornelius Johnson caught a touchdown pass in the fourth quarter of the Indiana game. That was the last time a receiver was targeted in the end zone. And by the way, just prior to that play, 55 red zone plays, 46 were run, 9 were pass, and only, and none were to a receiver in the end zone. They remedied some of that today by throwing some strikes to receivers in the end zone, making plays, having things happen. That's good because every team was starting to see what Michigan was doing with every play, and it was starting to become predictable.
No doubt.
And Michigan finally changed. Thank you very much. It certainly helped in the second half.
The self-scout is very, very important here because we know, look, Michigan is arguably the best rushing offense in the country. I mean, it may not statistically be the case, but, when you line them up against any other team, and with this offensive line and the combination of backs, I wouldn't take any rushing attack over Michigan's. Very easy to lean into that too much to the point where another aspect of your game isn't developed as much, right? Where you think no matter what the other team, what kind of look they're giving us, our best option is to run the football. You got to figure, even if that works against the current opponent, will it work against the best opponent? And so what do I mean by that? You look back at the Michigan State game. We kind of talked about it. You gave some great stats, Steve. One of the things that we were looking at in the red zone, he's like, man, okay, these red zone opportunities, man, 4 of the 5 times the first play, they ran the football, right? And then you look at when they threw it, or when Michigan State in the last game, when they were in split safety, we talked about this in the pregame. There's a difference between split safeties and too high. People kept saying, oh, they're in too high, you can't throw the football. First of all, that's a misnomer. You can't throw the football against too high defenses. But split safety, a lot of times they were in split safety defense with low safeties. They were in quarters, triggering hard on the run. You got one-on-one on the outside in that situation, even in the split safety look, because they're leaving their corners on an island. That's prime opportunity to maybe take some shots, right? That wasn't the way that Michigan was leaning. And then not to mention the fact 71 possessions that we charted, 36 of those times they were in one high. And still you saw a huge preponderance of rushing attacks. So in the self-scout, they're saying, and you can see it earlier in this game, we got to take some shots down the field. We got to give our athletes some opportunities down the field. And we got to give JJ some more reps because we saw earlier in the season, he's taking those shots. He's overthrowing them. Clearly, it's not honed. Even if you're hitting it in practice, we got to get the timing down in games. You got to start repping it if you're going to do it. And again, the stats might not be pretty. And I know I'm getting all these people on Twitter. What are you talking about? You're the only one in the country saying they made some progress today. No, I'm not. I'm sure inside they're saying, okay, we got some work to do, but this was a step forward. We got some things down. We got some more work to do. These guys, though, we know that we are a little bit closer than we were before this game.
Got one more week to show it. Porous secondary is Nebraska. That's the opponent for next week. And then, quite frankly, weather does become an issue for passing football teams as we head to the final 2 weeks of the regular season, Ira.
This is the Retirement Income Solutions Locker Room Wrap-Up Show on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket. We are online at WTK.com. We're on Ticket TV. This is also the MichiganInsider.com's post-game wrap-up as well. At Retirement Income Solutions, they establish financial peace of mind through long-term trusting relationships. Their clients choose to work with them because they go beyond providing investment advice and creating retirement plans to truly partner with their clients across accounts, assets, and even generations. They believe in building relationships based on respect, integrity, and personalized service. Their financial advisors are deeply committed to your financial success. To find out how they can help grow and preserve your wealth, visit our friends from Retirement Income Solutions at risadvisory.com. That's risadvisory.com. Steve, you mentioned the next game is Nebraska. For those that haven't heard yet, the Nebraska game is a 3:30 p.m. kickoff. So we'll go on the air live at 11:30 a.m. with the KeyBank Countdown kickoff live from the Bud Light Victor's Lounge at Joe's Garage. And real quickly, we're going to get to the plays of the game, the players of the game. So we've got a lot more to talk about in Michigan's 52-17 win over Rutgers. But do have to mention that Clemson lost on the road at Notre Dame. We got to mention that Alabama lost in overtime on the road on a 2-point conversion at LSU.
Let me speak to that for a moment. 3 of the top 6 teams lost today. So when they were challenged, okay, and then the road team lost every one of them. When they were challenged, those 3 teams lost. And Michigan was challenged at halftime, but they were determined not to be a victim. And I know there's a difference, in who you're losing to. Some of these were bigger, higher ranked.
I'm not sure there's a whole lot of difference between Notre Dame and Rutgers.
Well, Notre Dame didn't make this game close, and they had they too had a punt return block for a touchdown. They also had a pick six that went 94 yards for a touchdown. Notre Dame was up 28-0, okay, in the fourth quarter. That's a statement loss for Clemson. Goodbye. And then Alabama, you think goodbye. You just never know for sure. But when it comes to what's important to Michigan right now is having 3 of those 6 teams drops, puts Michigan into the top 4 where it doesn't matter. You still have to beat Ohio State. But it has given life to the Big 12. It has given life to a little bit of the Pac-12. And I'm looking at the SEC schedule, and LSU has got 2 games left in the SEC schedule. They're both on the road. They play at Arkansas, who lost to Liberty, and they also got Texas A&M. And Texas A&M is not a vintage Texas A&M team. The only other team, Alabama could still tie if it's a 3-wayer, but Ole Miss is in the runner-up spot with 1 loss. They have 2 SEC games left. One is against Alabama, and the other is the Egg Bowl against their rival Mississippi State. So LSU looking in a very good position to represent the SEC West.
It's crazy.
In a matchup with Georgia for the SEC title. And what does that mean?
Well, Georgia winning the SEC championship actually is the one thing that does keep the Pac-12 alive the most, because if it knocks out any other SEC team, it actually kind of takes an SEC spot and could give it to a Pac-12 team by what Georgia's done on their own. Could come down to, do they give it to the Pac-12 champ or Tennessee, who both got blown out by Georgia at some point during the season?
Well, we could go from a situation, Sam, where people were talking on Tuesday about 3 SEC teams making it. What if it's 1 and we go to the scenario that you brought up in the pregame show? What if Michigan-Ohio State is a 3-point game?
Right.
What if it comes down to the final 2 minutes, and is the Big Ten in play to send 2?
Yeah, that's what makes November so wild.
Yeah, so
the ebbs and flows are really, really wild.
And I tweeted this. It couldn't have gone much better for the loser of the Michigan-Ohio State game tonight. The CFP dominoes fell the way that you wanted them to fall, right?
For them and TCU.
Because I believe that how you lose is important. Yeah, Oregon lost to Georgia, and Georgia is the number 1 team in the country. But you got destroyed. You got eviscerated. You are disqualified. Clemson, you lost to a bad Notre Dame's not good. Notre Dame is not good. And you lost in an emphatic fashion. You are disqualified if we are talking about 1-loss teams from the SEC and 1-loss teams from the Big Ten, and then still an undefeated TCU. Now, still some things have to fall the Big Ten's way for it to happen. It has to be a close game for the loser to get in. But there's hope now. I have more hope after watching what happened tonight around the country than I did heading into it. But this was an interesting sort of dichotomy when you look at these 2 teams. You look at Michigan, Ohio State, because I think they're the antithesis of one another. Ohio State is a team that is built for the playoff track meet, right? Down in the South, pristine conditions, don't have to worry about cold, don't have to worry about snow, don't have to worry about wet. They are primed for that. But when it comes time to be in a November slugfest, when you got to be able to punch a team in the mouth and be able to stop a team from punching you in the mouth, I question that. When it came time to line up against Northwestern, yeah, they were able to do it eventually. But not throughout that game. Not throughout that game. Northwestern was giving it to them in the trenches.
And Northwestern's the worst team in the Big Ten.
And Northwestern's the worst team in the Big Ten. Now, Ohio State will look at Michigan and say, okay, but can you dial up your throw game when you need to? Right. Sure, you're built for Big Ten slugfest. You're built for the November football in Columbus or Ann Arbor. But when it comes to track meet playoff time, can you do it? Both of those teams have questions to answer, not about whether they're among the best teams in the country, but do they have the elements, do they have the ingredients to win championships? And they have some time to continue to build on that. I just happen to think it's a lot easier for Michigan to grow in the way that it needs to grow than it is for Ohio State to grow in the way that it needs to. You weren't physical last year. You weren't physical to start this year, and you aren't physical now. Are you going to get it all of a sudden? I question that. Michigan still has time to get what it needs to get in the throw game, and they have the talent there to do it.
All right, guys, one more thing before we get to the plays of the game and our players of the game. I'm assuming more an anomaly than anything else for Steve, for Michigan to be minus 13 in points on special teams. Jake Moody missing 2 field goals. Now, they were long kicks, but still missing 2 field goals. And then obviously, while Michael Barrett did make up for it with 2 interceptions, he did make the mistake and gave up the block punt that led to the score. I don't know the last time Michigan was that negative in special teams in a game.
Well, it's going to get my harshest grade in the report card for next week in Nebraska. That's for sure. And then, that's part of the anatomy of an upset that happens. You could see how things were building in that first half. Again, Michigan comes in undaunted and, in the second half, it's a very, very confident football team in the second half. Again, the defense, turned it up another notch, especially with 3 turnovers, 3 interceptions in that one. And special teams struggled a bit. They were 50-yard field goals, at 49 and 48 yards, not much of a wind, and they were close misses. I was glad to see that Moody made a field goal so that he didn't go home to Ann Arbor wondering all of a sudden, because kickers and things are, it's one of those things I asked Jake, like in the summertime. It's like, well, what else are you good at? Can you hit free throws? Can you make putts? And he goes, no, football's the only thing I seem to be good at under pressure. Mm-hmm. And when you're like that, it's like, well, let's hope you don't have any, confidence, issues or anything like that for football. And, something like 2 misses in a row can do something like that. But no, I think he'll be okay, but it will be something to watch as we go forward. And the other thing that I think you got to look at defensively going forward is it seems like every game people are, quarterbacks are just taking a quick 3-step and a toss.
Yeah.
And a 50-50 ball. And it's going over a Michigan defender, and it's like a 30-yard pass play, and it's like every quarterback's doing it. Some of the worst quarterbacks in the Big Ten are doing it. Connor Blasiak is doing it. Gavin Wimsatt did it, this past weekend, and they're all doing it. Just one over the top on the sideline.
And it's the big plays that are only reason why they're Michigan's giving up anything. Points at all.
And that's kind of my point. That's like all they can do. It speaks to me that teams can't do anything but that. Now that doesn't excuse that it's something that they need to tighten up on, because Vance has been talking about that with Vance Bedford, who you watch us all the time. Vance has been talking about, hey, being physical at the line of scrimmage on some of these fade balls. That's not necessarily in the recipe of some of the DBs, and especially when you are at a height disadvantage to some of these bigger 6'3", 6'4" guys. To hinder them at the line, to be a little more physical with them might be a way to bridge that gap. It's something to look at, right? It's something to focus on. But, man, I mean, what can you say about this defense, man? I just think from front to back, from back to front, they've exceeded expectations.
Yes,
they have been fantastic. I think that Jesse Minter has come in, and considering what that unit last year lost and the way he sort of dialed in a pressure package that takes advantage of the talent that he has been outstanding. The adjustments that we've seen on the back end, coverage-wise, from Steve Clinkscale has been outstanding too. And I think that the coaching job that Mike Elston has done, I think we gotta go harder in the paint on Mike Elston, because no unit on this team lost more than a defensive line, right? And he has come in, and those guys play. First of all, you got some guys that are making some real good individual plays, Mike Morris especially. But the high IQ play that we see from them game in and game out, from screen recognition, to be able to, snuff out shovel passes and things like that, these guys think on their feet. And you have to attribute that to coaching. I just can't say enough about the great job this defensive staff has done.
Guys probably talked about it earlier in the week. You see Mike Morris being recognized by Mel Kiper Jr. as a potential first-round pick in the NFL, one of his top 25 players.
Yeah, that's an impressive leap that he's made. We should also mention Javon Green traveled but did not play, so that obviously impacts some of the 50-50s because he'd be out there on some of those when they're the contested balls on the outside. Though Will Johnson, Sam, played it pretty good. He had to give up one or two, but he had kind of a mixed review. Had the interception, got his Buffs back.
Yeah, man. Okay, so I admit that that was a little personal. That was a little personal when I see Will go. I've been knowing to do since he was in middle school, man.
I get it. So
yeah, that one strikes a different chord, but yeah, it was good to see him. You can see him playing with more confidence every single week, and he brings that physicality he brings the length. He has good speed. He's not a track guy, but runs well enough, especially with how physical he is. It's about the experience. So it's good that they got him reps earlier in the season. I think they're ready. He's going to be ready for prime time by the time they get to it. Because, these next few teams can't throw the football worth a lick. That doesn't mean you shake them off like they're nothing. But the test is in a few weeks for the secondary. And I feel like he's getting some good studying in now, Steve Clark.
The one guy next Saturday is Trey Palmer. He's probably one of the top 5 to 8 receivers in the Big Ten. So that will be the main point of emphasis for Nebraska. They'll try to throw over the top to Palmer against Michigan secondary. We'll see how they do. If it's anything like we've seen the last few weeks, be successful in the first half and be absolutely shut out the second half.
So there's one comment that I want to touch on, because I feel like we, as a crew, even when it comes to Devin, when it comes to Al, when it comes to Vance, we get Joe Simon in. I think that we do a very good job of offering praise and criticism and praise. It's not all one way for us. Even with the team that was 8-0, that's 9-0 now, we talk about the things that they need to improve upon. What we don't do is hammer them unnecessarily. And I feel like some people want us to hammer them unnecessarily, like this. So JMatt277 says, stop giving Michigan play callers a pass. We aren't. The more plays, the more chances for injuries. If we lose Blake to injury, what happens to us? We need to figure out how to get our wideouts going. First of all, we've been saying they need to get their wideouts going. Didn't we say that last week? I know I said that last week. They need to be more intentional about getting the receivers involved. They need to do a better job of scheming guys open or giving their playmakers at receiver some one-on-one opportunities. In the first half of this game, there were a couple of 3rd and 4s in there. There were a couple of 3rd and shorts, not red zone plays, but I'm talking about pre-red zone plays or fringe red zone plays where it was 3rd and short, and they went run on 2 of those occasions and got stuffed, right? And so said, hey, they need to diversify their 3rd down play calling, right? But when you see them working things, making play calls that are intentionally about, we need to work on this part of our offense, you need to give them credit for that. Not to say, everything is rosy, that everything is fixed, but say you can see them making some progress in the direction that they need to go, which is what I'm saying right now. I think the run game is pristine. They need to make some progress in the passing game. I think we're seeing those signs, Steve Clark.
I agree. I don't know how to take it from there. Maybe it's because we're running late.
No, we're good. We're good. All right, guys, let's get into the plays of the game, which will take us through of course, Michigan's 52-17 victory over Rutgers tonight now technically last night in Piscataway, New Jersey, since it's now technically in the morning. The first play of the game we're starting with is actually the drive of the game, which is brought to you by Brighton Ford. Get on board with Brighton Ford online at brightonford.com. And Michigan opened the game with its longest drive, 12 plays, 75 yards. Blake Corum actually it should have ended pretty early in the drive. Blake Corum had a 33-yard touchdown run that was erased by really a mental mistake. It was an illegal formation that if you don't just line up wrong, you score, and the drive is a lot quicker. Instead, they made them really work down at the end. And Sam, this is something we can kind of discuss, but we'll play the touchdown first. But it was 1st and goal at the 2, 2nd and goal at the 1, 3rd and goal at the 1, and finally on 4th and goal at the 1, Blake Corum finally punches it in. Here is the capper of the drive of the game brought to you by Brighton Ford.
Well, here we go. 4th and goal from inside the 1. Handoff up the middle. Blake Corum dives. Touchdown, Michigan. Blake Corum, a 1-yard touchdown run. His 15th rushing touchdown of the season. That is 2nd in the nation. And Michigan leads it 6-0.
And so, of course, they had the lead, made it 7-0, but Michigan eventually trails 17-14. We're going to get to that in a moment. But, Sam, there were a lot of plays at like the 2 and 1 yard line. I know that's going to be something that people are going to bring up a lot all week.
Well,
I know it's going to come up a lot.
What it told me is, like I said, we talked about, man, we're on top of it. Because we said before the game, they couldn't just line up and punch this team in the mouth last year, right? Now, they're better. Michigan is better up front this year, but we had some inkling that Ryan Hayes was going to be out of this game. We know Trente is out. Love Carson. Carson is really, really coming along, but they don't have their starting 5 out there right now. So my point is, a team that you couldn't knock out the box last year is going to not be pushovers this year. And we saw that when Rutgers knew what Michigan was going to do, Michigan wasn't able to just ram it down their throats. So I want to give Rutgers some credit for that. Now, Michigan eventually punched it in, but that's a cautionary tale of sorts. I don't think, not necessarily against Ohio State, because I don't think Ohio State is as physical as Rutgers. Ohio State's better than Rutgers. Don't get me wrong, because you're going to see some Buckeyes see this, and they're going to be all in my mentions. I didn't say Rutgers is better than Ohio State. I'm saying Rutgers is more physical up front than Ohio State. Yeah, I said it. Yeah, I believe it. Rutgers is more physical than Ohio State, period. And we saw that in this game today.
Sam just went into 3D on the stream.
He did. He went right through the camera. Offensive play of the game time, guys, here on the Retirement Income Solutions Locker Room Wrap-Up Show and on Ticket TV. The offensive play of the game is brought to you by Bud Light, official game day partner of Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket. So we fast forward. Michigan's trailing 17-14 at the half. The defense forces a 3-and-out. And the Michigan offense then proceeds to move the ball down to the Rutgers 14-yard line, back inside the red zone again. And it's down to 3rd down again. It's 3rd and 6. JJ McCarthy connects with fellow sophomore Donovan Edwards for the go-ahead touchdown with 8:24 to go in the 3rd quarter. This is the offensive play of the game, brought to you by Bud Light.
3 receivers split right, 2 split left. JJ McCarthy from a shotgun. Back to pass on this big 3rd down play. He's going to fire towards the end zone. Donovan Edwards back of the end zone. And the ball is ripped clean, but they're going to say touchdown. He came down with it. Donovan Edwards back of the end zone. A 15-yard touchdown reception from J.J. McCarthy, and the Wolverines are back on top.
So there's 8:24 to go in the 3rd quarter. Michigan gets the lead that, of course, they're not going to relinquish because Rutgers doesn't score again. We're now going to go to our defensive plays of the game, brought to you by the Reed Law Group. When your family life hits troubled waters, let their firm be the light that guides you back to stability. From divorce to child custody proceedings, they will be there for you. Reach them at reedlawgrouppc.com. That's Reed, R-E-E-D, reedlawgrouppc.com. 2 plays later, after that touchdown that Michigan got the lead, 2 plays later, Michael Barrett gets an interception. 2 plays after that, Michigan scores a touchdown to make it 28-17. And then the very next play after that, Michael Barrett with another interception. 3 touchdowns in 1 minute and 42 seconds. The defensive plays of the game are Michael Barrett's 2 interceptions. We're going to bring them to you now. So here are the defensive plays of the game, brought to you by the Reed Law Group.
Rashard Rochelle actually in at quarterback, a wide receiver. Wimsatt back to pass, and it's intercepted. Mike Barrett has got it going the other way. 30, 20, inside the 15, and he's knocked out of bounds at the 10-yard line. And John, we called for a turnover, and Michigan's defense answers the call from the 25-yard line. Wimsatt from the shotgun, back to pass. Steps up in the pocket, now fires crossing pattern, tip, intercepted again. It's Michael Barrett again. 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown, Wolverines. Michael Barrett, a pick 6, and Michigan suddenly leads it 34-17.
They add the extra point, make it 35-17. That's 3 touchdowns in 1 minute 42 seconds. Needless to say, that was a lot of fun, that stretch of football, guys. That went from, the game was not a little nip and tuck to, this game's over.
Yeah, I was happy for Mike Barrett, man. I mean, and they sort of alluded to it on the broadcast. He's back up. He was a guy who wasn't even in the rotation.
And he gave up the touchdown on the punt.
Yeah, he wasn't even in the rotation last year. And then after the Michigan State game, you might recall when they were having all the pressure with all the problems with the tempo. And so you needed a base package that even if they went tempo, you were okay with your base. And that's when we started to see Mike Barrett more. You come back this year and Nakai Hill-Green out injured. Mike Barrett is able to go in there. He's been a solid guy all year. You get him in this game, and man, him sticking around, him grinding it out, it was rewarded. You even saw him break out some of his offensive skill because you remember he came in as an offensive guy. He was a high school quarterback, running back, receiver, and he played linebacker.
He's thrown a pass in a game.
Right, but he showed you. He kind of broke out a little bit his QB running back stuff with the spin and got it to the end zone, Steve. That was just good to see.
Well, what I remember is Michael Barrett in the season opener against Minnesota in 2020. Like, came out of nowhere and made 2 big plays, and Michigan absolutely destroyed them to keep the jug. But yeah, it was good to see him making some plays again. And again, that defense ignited things. It broke Rutgers' back essentially from that point. It got easier for Michigan to score in the red zone after that when they went up by so much in just a short period of time. So the defense answered the bell, and the offense changed their play calling a little bit, especially inside the red zone. So I think these things were really, really key in the second half for both sides of the ball, Ira.
Rutgers gets the ball back on their next possession. They actually get the ball over to Michigan's side of the field, but a sack by Upshaw Morris puts the ball 4th and 10. They punt the ball back to Michigan. And that eventually, fast forward, gets us to our gem of the game, brought to you by Lewis Jewelers. Check out Lewis Jewelers' brand new and bigger location. Visit their store at 300 South Maple Road in Ann Arbor. They're always online at lewisjewelers.com. Lewis Jewelers, proud partner of Michigan Athletics and Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket. And guys, with 23 seconds to go in the third quarter, something that I know, and we've talked about it already on this show, we talked about it on the pregame show, talked about it all week long, something that you really wanted to see, which is a red zone target in the end zone to a wide receiver, and we get just that. The gem of the game, J.J. McCarthy to Cornelius Johnson, makes it 42-17. Here is the gem of the game, brought to you by Lewis Jewelers.
2nd and goal from the 5. JJ back to pass. Looking, fires back of the end zone. Caught. Touchdown, Wolverines. Cornelius Johnson's got it, and the Wolverines extend the lead to 41-17.
Of course, they had the extra point, 42-17, add a field goal from Jake Moody, then one more touchdown. The final score is 52-17. Michigan now 9-0 in the season, 6-0 in Big Ten play, and moving on to the final 3 games of the season. The Nebraska game is coming up on Saturday, 3:30 at Michigan Stadium. Kickoff time was announced a little while ago, 3:30 this coming Saturday at Michigan Stadium. Then the Illinois game against a team that was and may no longer be ranked when the time comes. I don't know if you can lose to Indiana and Michigan State and still hold on to a ranking. That's the second to last game of the season. And then, of course, the last game of the year against Ohio State. 3 games left in the regular season.
That's the most disappointing outcome of the day. I should have listened to my first mind about Illinois. Said we did not know how good because they're in the West. And every time you start to think some team from the West, okay, that they're the one. This is the best team. You know, you look at Minnesota, they blow out Michigan State. They're the one. That's it. They got it. No, they're not the one. They can't do it. You're looking at Wisconsin. Okay, they make the check. No, not them. They can't do it. You look at Purdue. Purdue has some rough luck early season. No, they can't do it. Illinois is the last of the Mohicans, right? The last team to salvage some respect for the West. But who had they really played? Because we had this discussion in our pregame show, like who's the third best team in the Big Ten? By record, it was Illinois. I said, I don't know. I mean, can you really say they're better than Penn State when Penn State's losses are to Michigan and Ohio State? Granted, they got destroyed by Michigan, but still, it's Michigan and Ohio State. Illinois had lost to Indiana. Can we really say Illinois is better than Penn State? I should have listened to myself, Steve Clark, and I didn't
listen. You did listen to yourself.
Michigan State. I didn't think Michigan State. My point is, I picked them to really beat Michigan State down.
I did.
Not just beat them, but beat them down.
You and me
I
both.
couldn't have been more wrong.
You and me both. I mean, I went to the window on that one. You know, and
so what he's saying is less costly for you.
Yeah, and so when we talk about this game, because there are going to be some people say, "Oh man, you know, Michigan State, that just shows, you know, that team has talent and Mel Tucker, he prevented them from imploding. Maybe he prevented them from imploding, but it says more about Illinois that Michigan State won that game than it does about Michigan State. Illinois was fraudulent. Illinois was way overrated. And Michigan State was able to take advantage of that.
And now Michigan State might be able to get to a bowl game now because they, you know, just need to win 2 more games, and Rutgers and Indiana is coming up on Michigan State's schedule.
And you are listening to the Retirement Income Solutions Locker Room Wrap-Up Show on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA Ann Arbor, Accumulation. Also, we're on Ticket TV as part of the MichiganInsider.com's post-game coverage. It's kind of fun combining forces in the post-game, Sam.
Yeah, and I want to take a minute to address a question from JR, because I I feel like maybe I contributed to, maybe not a realistic expectation. And maybe I didn't have realistic expectations myself, because the question from JR was or is, Sam, who's been more disappointing in the passing game, Matt Weiss, JJ, or the wide receivers? I think it's worthy of note that you have several layers of new there. That while, we were giving adequate attention at the time about there needing to be, giving them some grace period for an adjustment. Now, I don't know if maybe I took enough into account that not only did you have 2 first-time play callers, but you also had 2 guys whose expertise wasn't necessarily coming in, their primary expertise. I don't want to be misconstrued and saying they don't know the passing game. I'm not saying that. But what is their strength? Their strength is the run game. By trade, Sharon's the O-line guy and the tight end guy, right? And Matt Weiss is a run game guy. When Michigan when they were clinicking with the Ravens before last season, right? So Brian Jean-Marie leaves and he hires Matt Weiss. They were clinicking with Matt Weiss before that. And they were clinicking with Matt Weiss in the run game. That was the expertise that he was bringing over from the Ravens. So I think maybe there was a misnomer or a misconception about what element would see the most benefit from the move. That by this move, that the passing game would see the biggest jump as opposed to the run game, when background doesn't suggest that that's the case. And you've really seen in the run game, I think what Michigan does best offensively is the way they disguise their run game. Like they run, there are 3 or 4 base plays, and I swear they keep opponents off balance with those 3 or 4 base run plays because teams don't know what the hell is coming. They make it look different every single time. And I think you got to give Jim Harbaugh and Matt Weiss credit for that, and Sharon credit for that. But when we talk about the pass game, I think I think that's the part where we're seeing the growing pains be the most pronounced. That doesn't mean that they can't do it. That doesn't mean that they can't get better. But why are we seeing one phase be far ahead of the other? And I think it has to do with, well, first of all, what were they last year? So building off of that. And then what is the strength of the play callers, of the new play callers coming in? And I think it's the run game. And I think that lends to it too. So maybe I didn't give enough. I didn't speak to that enough at the beginning.
It might even be simpler than that. And I'm going to ask a question before I get to my comment. But how big is confidence in football? Pretty big, right? The confidence is huge. And I think they found out, or something they knew along going all the way back to the Washington game in 2021. We don't need to pass. We can run. And we can run, and that's going to be our identity. And you've got the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. You have a Heisman Trophy candidate at running back. And they're basically coming in there saying, we're running the ball. You can't stop us. You might be able to slow us down for a half, but in the second half, it's going to be an overwhelming depression of our run game, and we're going to win big. And that's their attitude. That is their attitude throughout this. With confidence, with a bunch of testosterone, you are not going to beat us in our run game. And Rutgers, due to good play by Rutgers, due to a couple of starters not being in on the offensive line, seeing how this half was progressing, they said, okay, we're going to make a change. And maybe that change is only just for that Rutgers game, and you're going to see the same thing all over again with Nebraska. But I think there's a certain basic humanistic element to it that they're coming in with that kind of bravado that they're not going to be stopped. And, we'll see how it goes. It's certainly worked good. It's certainly working well. So.
Was someone taking food behind me or something?
I think they're cleaning up behind us. It's not Sam's food. Don't worry. It's not Sam's food.
It's not my food.
For those that are watching on the video.
But so what I'm getting at is when I say, getting back to when I said it's a step forward.
Yeah.
What I'm taking into account is, all right, JJ's, it's not just JJ growing in this job, right? First time starter.
everybody.
It's everybody.
Right.
It's everybody, including the play callers, and the fact that they're 9-0 with all that new and them still growing in all those different roles, I think is a positive, and it's why you can still look at them 9 games into the season and say, all right, that is not necessarily the case that they are what they are after 9 games. I still think with this dynamic after 9 games, this is an offense that's still growing, especially in the past.
So I think it was a good question by the person who wrote it in, because you could certainly look at the play caller, Matt Weiss, okay? You can look at J.J. McCarthy in the previous games taking shots, and when he did, it wasn't being completed. Today's shots look like they could have been caught, and they weren't.
Right.
So now you look at the receivers and say, well, is it partly on them? And then you go back and look back and say, well, look, heck, in the red zone, they never got an opportunity to illustrate themselves. So how can you blame it on the receiver? So, I mean, there's a little bit of that all going around. Sam, you saw another comment. You're already chuckling. Is it against me?
No, it's against me.
Oh, okay.
He said the guy probably took all the bland stuff from the food.
All right. We're now answering questions to people who are talking about food. I mean,
Well, it's because they're watching the stream and see what's going on behind behind what's going on.
Oh my God, I love
Got the
people.
fire
I love
behind
my
me.
people. I
We're
love
hanging out in the
you guys.
lobby of Grand Traverse Resort and Spa for the Retirement Income Solutions locker room wrap-up show, as well as the post-game coverage on the MichiganInsider.com as well. Before we get to the key players of the game, any other thoughts?
No, I just think I think there are 2 reactions that I think we need to pull people back from the ledge. Those of you who are jumping off a cliff about the passing game not being able to light opponents up, relax. They're 9-0. Today was progress. Maybe not in the numbers, but in approach. Today was progress. To those of you on the other end who said, hey, everything is everything. Everything is perfect. Come back from that ledge. Everything is not perfect. He's really, really good. It can get closer to perfect, and we saw a step in that direction too. So Michigan is in a very good place. They got 2 opponents that they can continue to hone the things they need to hone against, getting ready for the big one at the end of the season against Ohio State.
We are building. It's the 3-step march really through November to get to the last one. The first step is done, a 52-17 win over Rutgers. Next is Nebraska at 3:30 this coming Saturday at Michigan Stadium. Then the Illinois game the following Saturday at Michigan Stadium. And then, of course, the grand finale, the game. All right, guys, the key players of the game. I'm going to throw 3 names out there. And when you guys want to add anything else, go right ahead. But, of course, it's pretty easy to start with the 2 running backs because you have Blake Corum, 20 carries, 109 yards, 2 touchdowns. You have Donovan Edwards, 161 total yards, 109 on the ground, 52 through the air, including the touchdown. And then, of course, Michael Barrett. He does give up the touchdown on special teams, but he makes up for it with 2 touchdowns of his own, 2 interceptions of his own. One sets up a short field for a score, and the other one is a pick 6, so it is a score itself. So those 3 guys in particular, obviously very much key players of the game in this one. Michigan's 52-17 victory. What say you, Steve Clark?
I'll just add another name because Mike Morris continues to shine. He got another sack and a half, so what does that bring him up to, like 7? So far in the season, something like that.
But he had a sack and a half, you said? Yeah, that's 7. He takes him to 7. He had 5.5 coming in the game.
All right. So you agree with me on that one?
Yeah.
And he had another sack and a half on this one. So he just continues to shine in that one. It's obvious who the playmakers were in this particular game. And, hey, it's probably time to move on. Mm-hmm. And start thinking about the final 3 games. Really?
Right. Crazy.
The season is 75% complete, guys.
Oh, my God.
Hey, when you run the football, it shortens the game, right?
It does.
It shortens the season, too.
Well, the Harbaugh saying the days are long, but the years are short. Yeah, it goes by quick. And they go by quick even when we had losing seasons, but the winning seasons go by really quick.
And it's really,
super fast.
It really makes it nice. But, again, when it's all said and done, 3 teams out of the top 6 lost today. And Michigan was looking like one of those teams, man. It's like the, first Saturday in November, all heck is breaking loose. And Michigan wasn't going to have anything of that in the second half. So everybody can start relaxing again and realize that Michigan avoided the bullet. Okay. The 3 teams could not. 3 national championship contending teams could not. And it opens the door for Michigan going forward because they are still one of the few teams that are alive at 9-0.
And the add on to what you just said, that basically the two best teams, well, not basically, the two best teams in the Big Ten went on the road to play basically the two worst teams in the Big Ten. And one of them fared a lot better. They both won, but one of them, Sam, fared better than the other in victory, the way Michigan played at Rutgers, and particularly in the second half versus the way Ohio State. I know it was windy and there were adverse conditions, but the conditions don't impact the line of scrimmage.
Who would have thought, I'm sorry, Sam, who would have thought that CJ Stroud would have more rushing yards than passing yards?
What happened to the Heisman candidates today?
Yeah, so I mean, man, I guess I look at it this way. I'm
Hooker
not
and Stroud.
Yeah, I'm not that, that's not that striking to me, considering the conditions, right?
Okay, but Stroud doesn't run the football.
I know, and again, but the conditions were that sort of start. I mean, you could not. They showed him trying to kick the ball in the pregame, and the ball went like 30 yards and fell. It was like you could not throw the football if the wind was against you, right? And then if it was with you, I mean, unless you had like the best touch known to man, because like he had a couple of receivers running wide open down the football field, and I'm sure he thought, man, this is pinpoint, overthrew him because the wind was at his back. So I'm not as hung up on that as I am. This is not a physical football team.
That's what I'm talking about. The weather impacts the skill guys. The weather does not impact the guys in the trenches.
In the trenches, right. And so Northwestern was able to line up and run the football on them, was able to punch them in the mouth. And then I'm looking at Ohio State. Okay, so Ohio State, you got to do the same thing, right? You got to line up and run the football. I know you don't have Travion Henderson, but your offensive line is intact. You should be able to lean on Northwestern, and they couldn't lean on Northwestern. So if you can't lean on Northwestern, you mean to tell me you're going to be able to lean on Michigan? I thought the same thing versus Penn State last week. I'm like, man, these dudes, they don't get movement at the line of scrimmage. I mean, yeah, they'll be in a track meet with anyone and can maybe outrun anyone. But punching a team in the mouth, which is what Michigan is going to make that game, they got a challenge on their hands. And let me just say one more thing about CJ Stroud. Lions, do not draft CJ Stroud. Brad Holmes, man, I don't want to see him. I don't want to see a Buckeye quarterback anyway. But this dude, I'm just telling you, it just feels like to me when adversity hits, because they were talking about he was telling me, I can't throw it, and the wind, and I can't hear. He strikes me as a guy that gets flustered. I want my leader to, even when he doesn't know what to do, but fake me out. Fool me, lie to me, make me think you know what you're doing. Make me think you know how to get us out of this, even if you don't, right? And he doesn't strike me as that kind of guy. So
we'll find
Lions,
out.
Please, no.
I think there are some weaknesses in Ohio State that can be exploited. I'm sure they're saying the same thing about Michigan. You asked Ira very quickly about the Heisman candidates.
It's just a bad day for Heisman candidates, relatively speaking.
Bryce Young threw for 328 yards, but he was less than 50% from the field. The difference about Bryce Young's game is he wasn't allowed to win it for Alabama because Brian Kelly had the move of the college football season in going for two against Alabama. When they scored the touchdown, they had won the coin toss in overtime, which elected them to go second. Now, if you kick the extra point and send it to double overtime, then it's Alabama who's got the last chance. And believe me, you go think about Bryce Young, I'm going to give it to him on a 2-point conversion and I'll win the game again. And Nick Saban walks off, like another winner. Brian Kelly said, enough of this. We are going to control our own destiny, not Bryce Young, not Nick Saban. And they went for two, and they got the game winner. And I think that's the thing that's going to be talked about quite a bit as the college football early week goes on.
I think CJ Stroud's his stock is down. I don't think Bryce Young's stock is down. I think the biggest problem for Bryce Young is Bill O'Brien. I just think if you were thinking about Bill O'Brien being your coach, I don't care who you are, what are you thinking? This guy has all the offensive talent known to man, and he doesn't have the excuse of being a first-time play caller. He's a former head coach. He's called a lot of plays, and you can't make these guys light up the scoreboard? No, wouldn't be my guy.
Yeah, so Bryce Young was not allowed to win it, and he didn't. And, he threw less than 50%.
He lost. Hooker loses. Blake Corum wins.
Blake
Has 2
Corum.
touchdowns. Didn't have a great game, but he won, has 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So he just got the stats. And now you move on to the games that actually, it wasn't a Heisman moment game for him anyway. He couldn't do anything to win the Heisman tonight, but he could definitely do things to lose it. But he got 100 yards, had 2 scores. His Heisman moment's coming up in a couple of weeks.
Right.
And if he wins that game in Columbus and has some Heisman moments, he actually now the Heisman has opened up for Blake Corum in a couple weeks because Tennessee loses and because Hooker's the quarterback of that team and he was the favorite.
Right.
And as you mentioned, CJ Stroud was ahead of him. Well, Michigan Ohio State could become not just a duel for who wins the division, but it could be who goes to New York as the favorite to win the Heisman. So we got a lot of November's going to be really fun. It got out to a great start. It was a great first Saturday of November. There's no question about it. The next few Saturdays are going to be awesome as well. And it was a lot of fun having you guys down here. We had a really packed lobby right when we started, as there was a.
We got a really packed stream. I mean, this thing is
I
loaded.
know it's.
at 1 o'clock in the
Everybody
morning.
knows they've got an extra hour of sleep coming, so that's I know it's like 1:13, but it's only 12:13 because you're going to get an extra hour of sleep.
Hey,
So there you
maybe
go.
we'll do this for Ohio State.
Well, if Michigan wins, I'll be ready to do this for Ohio State. There's no question about that, guys.
Yeah, 4 to midnight at least, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's been a lot of fun, guys. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Retirement Income Solutions Locker Room Wrap-Up Show on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket and on Ticket TV. The final score of tonight's game in North Jersey was Michigan 52, Rutgers 17. Thanks to Derek back in the Ann Arbor studios of Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket. Great job all day today inside the studio. Thanks to Miz as well. Great job up here. And he got back to Ann Arbor safely, so we appreciate that as well. Coming up tomorrow, well, really later on this morning at 10 a.m., it's Miz and the crew on the playground, starting off another week talking Michigan football. Then on Monday, which is technically tomorrow, it's Michigan Monday on the Michigan Insider, Joe Simon's final verdict. The monster moment of the game with Monster Tree Service, Will Heiniger, the mayor of Michigan Twitter, Scott Bell, Monday morning quarterback Devin Gardner, and more. Another packed week of maize and blue fun on the Michigan Insider and on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket. Next Saturday, the Wolverines are back home to host the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Kickoff is at 3:30 p.m. at the Big House. Of course, before the game, we'll be back with the KeyBank Countdown to Kickoff live from the Bud Light Fitness Lounge at Joe's Garage starting at 11:30 a.m. 2 final home games coming for our Wolverines, starting with the matchup with Nebraska next Saturday in Ann Arbor. Once again, the final score of tonight's game in North Jersey, Michigan 52, Rutgers 17. Thanks to Sam Webb. Thanks to Steve Clark. Thanks to all of you for listening and watching. Enjoy the rest of your football weekend. See you on the radio Monday morning. And as always,